Well, I have spent the better part of last night and today at the very bottom of the rabbit hole on these JFK files. And what do you know? I mean, not too much new, but literally what everyone already knew, which the government, entrenched bureaucrats, and overeducated institutionalists called us conspiracy theorists for. Turns out to be true. And if you think it's crazy, look no further than Chuck Schumer. He basically said the quiet part out loud when Trump was pushing the same buttons Kennedy was years ago.
To take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
And I'm going to prove him right, because much of what was released we already knew. But to illustrate exactly why I don't trust the government, we're going to put it all in one place for you, with the old and the new info, because it's pretty crazy how so many things are connected. Let's take a walk down that rabbit hole, shall we? You ever heard of a guy named Gary Underhill? He was a former World War II military intel guy who then went on to work for the CIA, working for projects such as special assignments that were classified. Well, in 1964, the Warren Commission determined that Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated Kennedy and acted alone. Shortly after, Mr. Underhill traveled from D.C. to New Jersey to confide in some friends, and according to newly unredacted report, what he said to those friends was, quote, he attributed the Kennedy murder to a CIA clique which was carrying on a lucrative racket in gun running, narcotics, and other contraband, and manipulating political intrigue to serve its own ends. Kennedy supposedly got wind that something was going on and was killed before he could blow the whistle on it. And wouldn't you know, 6 months later, Mr. Underhill was found dead, alone, and had allegedly shot himself in the left side of his head, even though he was right-handed. It was ruled a suicide. Now, in my experience on this earth, people who have come forward with information that incriminates big people or organizations that end up dead, I mean, do you really believe they killed themselves? Like Jeffrey Epstein? Don't worry, I'll get to that in a sec. Now, lots of other factors raise eyebrows, but did you know that JFK's car route was also changed at the last minute? By who? The mayor, Earl Cabell, who was, at the time of the shooting, a current CIA asset, and his brother, Charles, had been a senior member at the CIA that had been forced to retire from the agency the year before by JFK. Why does this matter? Well, this goes on to why the CIA would have it out for JFK as well. You ever heard of an agency called the ICA, the International Cooperation Administration? Probably not. Why? Because they were disbanded. They were the agency that was disbanded after the Bay of Pigs disaster in April of 1961. Mentioned this before, where under JFK, the U.S. tried to invade Cuba during the Cold War using humanitarian and foreign aid as a front to gather intel for that invasion. That bad intel that was gathered landed assets in a swamp, compounded with the fact that Kennedy denied air support that doomed the entire operation. That tension between the intel community and JFK was only made worse when Kennedy famously said this failure that would, quote, he would splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And 5 months later, he closed that agency, the ICA, which was seen as an attempt to hamper unaccountable covert operations. Guess what agency he started in its place? A little-known agency that was supposed to be more accountable to the State Department. That agency was called USAID. You see, prior to this, multiple agencies were using foreign assistance under their own agency cover to cover up their operations. The State Department, the CIA, and tons of others, many using the ICA as cover while competing to see who could out-intel each other, often with massive overlaps, and there were tons of turf wars within our own agencies. USAID was supposed to be the answer to stream all the accountability on that through the State Department. It really had absolutely nothing to do with building wells in Africa. Trust me, it was a cover, okay? As a SEAL, I was in countries that we weren't at war with for humanitarian purposes too, okay? I know this. Which gets me to the convenience of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, the reasoning of Oswald being the lone actor was that he had met with Cuban officials in Mexico City before and this whole assassination then happened. The official reports allege that it was carried out as retaliation related to the Bay of Pigs. But was it? We know that LBJ and Kennedy had beef, which led to a variety of other theories, including allegations that LBJ was in on it, with people citing multiple reports what appeared to be LBJ ducking prior to the first shot even being fired. And one of the first things LBJ did as the president after the assassination, which raised even more concern, was to establish that Warren Commission I mentioned earlier to investigate it. And who led that? A little guy named Allen Dulles. Now, Allen Dulles had been the former CIA director that JFK had fired. There were also significant policy 180s, like the reversal on Vietnam, where Kennedy's intent was to withdraw from Vietnam, and then LBJ, when he took over, accelerated the war. Now, almost all of this is not new, and much of it the CIA was happy to release at the time. But what we're finding out from these recent docs last night is that the CIA had one request. They had no oppositions to releasing most of this stuff years ago, but they did have one request for redactions: any mention of Israel or Israeli intelligence. Why? What were they doing? Were they involved in this? In fact, over a dozen incidences cited in the recent documents we got last night said that it was redacted from previously released documents. I don't have the answer to this, and these documents don't tell us. But this issue is part of the 1% that has been withheld all these years, which leads me to my already previous conclusion in general, that is, you can't trust the government for anything. By all accounts released, it appears that our own government assassinated the President of the United States, classified it, and then systematically leaked parts of the files over decades to the public, allowing for theories to be perpetuated for decades. Some of them were widely accepted as fact even. This type of campaign, that drip, drip, drip of information, that is a classic psyop that our intel community uses overseas to overthrow governments. Sometimes it's a method to desensitize people to the actual story when it does come out. That often confirms previous theories, and people don't even take it as a new revelation. Here we are. A lot of networks aren't even running the story in the first half of their shows, less than 24 hours after it has come out that the CIA apparently assassinated a president to change policy. So while this drop didn't tell me anything I didn't already suspect, it also conveniently held until, anyone was involved was dead, including the fact that the Secret Service agent that was assigned to JFK that day, the dude who jumped on the hood of that car, he conveniently died a month ago, which did confirm one thing: question the government. No. I don't care. You don't get to tell me I'm a conspiracy theorist anymore for anything. The onus is now on the government to give me the reason to trust them. Because beyond all this, the reckless spending, lying about foreign wars, forced vaccinations, currency manipulation, whatever, it's the same MO. If you dig past any headline on any matter, you get more questions than answers. I want to know about the Tesla that blew up in front of Trump Tower in Vegas. Why don't we know anything about that? I want to know about Thomas Matthew Crooks, the guy who shot at Trump. I want to know about Ryan Ruth and the Vegas shooter and Area 51. I want to know. No, actually, you know what? I deserve to know who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked children to. Was it the people running my government? We're owed those answers. Did he even kill himself? We are owed an answer on the $250 billion missing dollars from the Pentagon budget in the last audit. I deserve to know what you spent my Social Security contributions on. I demand to know whether or not there's any gold at all in Fort Knox, or how the CIA, via the Pakistani ISI, used Osama bin Laden as an intel asset for years, and then they let him fly planes into the Twin Towers, and then let him live in Pakistan 500 yards from their equivalent of a West Point when we killed him. Given my personal sacrifice in Iraq, I deserve to see the evidence of WMDs that we allegedly went to war for, that spent trillions of dollars and killed thousands of American troops. I want to know why they tried to force us to get vaccinated, why so many of them affiliated with making the decisions about COVID didn't practice any of the precautions that they mandated on us. I want to know everything. And I have the right to ask or demand, because this government works for us and they've forgotten that. Our government is supposed to be of, by, and for the people. These files that came out don't allow you to laugh at me or dismiss me on any question I have ever again. The government now has to prove to me why we should trust them. And if you work for the government, if you're one of these bureaucrats like shrugging your shoulders, if you don't care, may I remind you that's why Trump won. Because you guys betrayed that trust. You've done it a million times. The JFK files are just the latest example. That is why America doesn't trust the government. And what's the worst part about this is that Trump is the first guy in a long time that is making an effort to earn that trust back. And they're trying to kill him for it.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.